Hey friend! Today we are talking about pocket holes. Now, if you watched any of my project videos, and if you haven't watched any yet, definitely watch them after this video because I have a bunch of easy, beginner-friendly, and intermediate woodworking projects. But if you watched any of my project videos, almost 90% of those projects are built using pocket holes, and probably more than 90% actually. But I use pocket holes because pocket holes are a great beginner-friendly joinery method, and you can easily build furniture quickly using pocket holes. But one of the most common questions I get about pocket holes is, how do you fill them? So today, let's address that. Now, pocket holes definitely don't look great if they are exposed. But the number one way to not have to worry about the look of pocket holes is to make sure you try your best to hide them. So most of the time, I try my best to have them either on the bottom of the project or back of the project or something that's going to cover up the pocket holes. So I try my best to make sure that the pocket holes are not in the visible area of a project. However, that is not always the case because there are some times when you have no choice. You have to have pocket holes in places that might be visible. Now, one of the most common situations where you will have pocket holes on the outside is when you are building a box and attaching your boards like this. And you always want to do that because the pocket holes are angled. And when you put them this way, the screw is going to go in at an angle like this. And when it goes in at an angle like this, it has a whole bunch of material that it can grab onto. However, if the pocket holes were on the inside, and the screw would have to go in this way. And you can see here that if there were any little tiny misalignments, the screw would come out or it would cause this board to start cracking. So putting it this way with the pocket holes towards the outside is the most foolproof method. It is also the method where you will get the best, strongest joints. So yes, there are going to be situations where you're going to have to fill those pocket holes. And there are 4 basic ways that you can do that. Let's dive into it. The most intuitive, straightforward way to fill pocket holes is probably a wood filler. So all you need is a putty knife and wood filler, and you can fill the pocket holes. So all you need to do is pack this wood filler into this hole as well as you can. I like to leave a little bit extra on top because wood filler usually shrinks as it dries. So we have to wait for it to dry and see if we need to apply more. Now, of course, the biggest drawback of this technique is that you have to now wait for this wood filler to dry. It can take anything from a few hours to overnight for it to dry. And the second drawback of this is that as the wood filler dries, it usually shrinks. So sometimes you'll come back and you'll see that the wood filler has shrunk and now there is a little dip. So you have to apply another layer of wood filler. And I almost always have to do that whenever I use wood filler. So it can be a pretty long process if you want to use a wood filler to fill pocket holes. In terms of being able to paint or stain, wood filler obviously does not take stain very well. So if you are going to be staining your project, wood filler is probably not a good choice. But if you are planning to paint the project, then wood filler works perfectly well. Now let's go to the next technique, which is actually the other end of the spectrum of the techniques that I'm going to show you. And that is to just buy pre-made plugs. So you get white plugs, which are ready to paint, and you can also get wooden plugs. And in fact, you can get wood plugs of different species, so you can match the species you're using. So you can get oak or you can get pine. And using this is pretty easy. We are simply going to push this into the pocket hole. But one of the things that we need to do before we do that is to add in a little bit of wood glue because that's what's going to hold this in place. So I'm just going to use wood glue and push it in like so. And then you want to sometimes use a mallet and push it in as far as it can go. Now you can see if you look close that it isn't exactly flush with the surface. So we are going to have to trim this off to make it even. And to do that, you can use a flush cut saw and manually cut away the excess, or you can also use an oscillating tool with a woodcut blade. So I'm going to show you how to use the hand saw with this first. So now you can see that it is nice and flush. There's a little bit of unevenness because we used a manual saw. I can simply sand that away and that'll become nice and smooth, but I can't sand that just yet because this wood filler is still wet. Now, the third technique. In this third technique, which is actually one of my favorite techniques to use, and I use that anytime that I can, that is to use a dowel. So with the dowel, essentially you are making your own pocket hole plugs. Now this is a 3/8 inch dowel, which is what we use for the pocket holes. And all you need to do is push this into the pocket holes like that. And of course, before we do that, we want to make sure we add in some wood glue and push that right in. Sometimes you kind of need to twist it a little bit to get it to go in all the way as much as it will. We can wipe off some of this excess glue. And now we need to cut this off. Now again, you can use a flush cut saw, or in this case, I'm going to use an oscillating tool. And that is our pocket hole all filled up. It's nice and tight, and you can see that there is a little bit of blemish around here where my blade was hitting the surface. So you just have to kind of be careful about that, but there's nothing that a little sanding cannot handle. So you can see why using a dowel is my favorite technique, because a dowel is pretty budget friendly and all you need is another flush cut saw or an oscillating tool. Of course, flush cut saw needs a little bit more elbow grease, but you get a nice fill and you can keep using this rod for the next and the next and the next pocket hole. Now the great thing about both of these techniques, using the pre-cut pocket hole plugs as well as the dowel, is that they can easily be stained to match the boards that you're using. Now, what if you have a situation where you aren't able to find the plugs or a dowel to match the species of your wood? In that case, you can make your own pocket hole plugs using the boards that you are using with the help of a plug cutter attachment. Now, a plug cutter attachment, unfortunately, only works with the Craig 720, and this is the plug cutter attachment for that, where you can remove the drill guide from here and you can put in the plug cutter attachment. And the plug cutter attachment also comes with this special drill bit, which is going to cut out your pocket hole plugs for you. Now, unfortunately, the plug cutter attachment is only available for a 720, so you do need that in order to be able to cut your own plugs. Now, to cut the plugs, I'm simply going to clamp my board into it, load the plug cutter bit into my drill, and make my plugs. Now, these are the plugs. Now, you'll notice that they're still attached to the board right here. So in order to take them out, you do need to cut off this part of the board and take the plugs out. So now, same thing, we're going to use some wood glue in the pocket hole right here, and we are going to push this into place. So you can see that it's in and it's still a little raised. We do need to cut this off and sand it smooth as well. The other thing I noticed is that there is a little bit of a gap around the plug. Looks like cutting this plug is turning out to be a little challenging. I think I just need to let the wood glue dry overnight and come back to it tomorrow. So I let it dry overnight. So now that the wood glue has dried in this plug, I can go ahead and cut it out and trim it completely. Also, the wood filler has dried. So now I can go ahead and sand that down as well. Now I do want to show you the wood filler now that I have sanded it. If you look close, it has a little bit of space in it. There is a light dent. So if you were to use this, you would probably have to do one more coat of wood filler to get that nice even surface. So that is one of the biggest disadvantages of using a wood filler. You do have to do multiple coats. And now let's go ahead and sand the rest of the pocket holes. All right, so we have our 4 ways of filling pocket holes. We've got the wood filler, we've got the pre-made pocket hole plugs that you can buy. This is the pocket hole plug we made ourselves using a dowel, and this is the pocket hole plug we cut using a plug cutter attachment. So if you look close, you can see that, of course, we have the one with the wood filler. It does have a slightly porous texture to it. It does need one more coat of wood filler to make it nice and even, and then it can be painted. This right here is the pre-made pocket hole plug that we bought. I can see that the edges don't exactly fit inside the pocket hole right here, so there is some gap right here, and it would need a little bit of wood filler to get it to be nice and smooth. You can obviously paint it, but you could probably also stain it. Next up, we have the pocket hole plug that we made using a dowel. And you can see that that's really nice and tight in there. There isn't really a lot of gap around it. It's clean. You don't really need another coat of wood filler, so you could start using it right away. And this is great for if you are painting, of course, because it's nice and smooth. You don't feel any ridges, but also you could probably stain it. Of course, the color is different from the board a little bit, so that is definitely always going to be a factor. And then we have this right here, which you can probably barely see. It is the plug we cut out of the board using a plug cutter attachment, and of course it matches perfectly. The grain direction matches as well really well, and I can bet that when you stain it, it's going to blend in the best. And because I don't think this video is going to be complete without showing you what they look like once they're stained, let's do that. This is what it looks like, and as expected, the one that is the worst is the one with the wood filler. And the best is the pocket hole plug that we made ourselves using the plug cutter attachment. Second best is the one with the dowel, which has a little bit of color variation because obviously you cannot get the grain direction, etc. aligned, but it does blend in pretty decently. The third one here is the pre-made plug. I did realize that that is actually a hardwood plug, so which is probably why it has a very different color. However, you can buy pine plugs as well, but I still am not a fan of the amount of gap that you see all around it, so you would need to use wood filler, and then that cannot be stained again. So my favorite thing to use is the dowel, which is easy to make, and it is very budget friendly as well. So there, my friend, are 4 ways to fill pocket holes. And like I mentioned, using the dowel is my personal favorite way, whether I am painting or staining. If you are painting, you can also use the wood filler, which, remember, you would need to make multiple coats for sure and then wait for it to dry, etc. But with a dowel, you can get done with it really quickly. Be sure to grab your pocket hole reference guide from the description below. And if you would like to learn more about pocket holes, the basic tips and tricks, and the best way to get strong pocket hole joints, be sure to watch this video right here. And if you are new to pocket holes and want to buy your first pocket hole jig, definitely take a look at this video where I'm going to share exactly how to pick the best pocket hole jig that's going to work for your situation. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.